The sound that changed Claire Laurent's life wasn't a gunshot. It was a crack. A tiny, almost invisible crack running through the heart of the world's most expensive diamond. She froze. The polishing wheel continued humming beneath her fingertips, but every instinct she'd spent 15 years sharpening inside Antwerp's most exclusive diamond workshop screamed that something was wrong. Diamonds weren't supposed to have flaws like this. Not this one. This stone had arrived under military-grade security 48 hours earlier. It had traveled inside a titanium case, chained to the wrists of 2 private couriers, escorted by armored SUVs through streets closed to ordinary traffic. No official records listed its owner. No insurance company admitted it existed. Inside the workshop, people whispered only one name: the Crown of Winter, a flawless blue diamond estimated to be worth nearly $500 million. Claire adjusted the microscope. The crack wasn't natural. Someone had cut it. Years ago, deliberately. Her pulse quickened. She lowered the cutting tool until the diamond caught the morning light. Deep inside its crystal heart, something reflected differently. Not light. Metal. Her breath caught. No. She repositioned the stone. There it was again. A straight silver line where nature could never have created one. Someone had hidden something inside the diamond. Outside, rain washed across the centuries-old streets of Antwerp. Tourists wandered between chocolate shops and jewelry boutiques, completely unaware that beneath one quiet workshop window, a discovery was about to ignite a war stretching across Europe. Claire leaned back. Every diamond cutter learned the same rule during apprenticeship. If a stone told you something impossible, stop, call the owner, touch nothing. She reached toward the secure phone. Her fingers stopped inches away. Curiosity won. Just once. Just enough to see. Using the finest laser blade available, Claire widened the ancient seam by less than 0.5 millimeter. The room remained silent. Then, click. Something inside shifted. Her heartbeat echoed inside her ears. Very carefully, she lifted the upper section of the stone. Hidden inside an impossibly small hollow rested a black cylinder, no larger than a grain of rice. She stared at it in disbelief. A microfilm capsule. Inside a diamond. Whoever created it had expected nobody would ever find it. Before Claire could think, footsteps echoed down the hallway. She snapped the diamond shut. The capsule disappeared back inside. The workshop door opened. Her supervisor, Victor, smiled politely. "You've been here since dawn." Claire forced herself to smile. "This one is unusual." Victor walked closer. His expression never changed, but his eyes did. He looked at the diamond, then directly at Claire, almost as if he already knew. "Leave it untouched," he said quietly. "The client arrives tonight." Claire nodded. Victor lingered another second before leaving. The moment the door closed, Claire realized something unsettling. Victor had never asked whether the inspection was finished. He only wanted to know whether she'd opened it. That evening, Antwerp glittered beneath cold rain. Claire left work, carrying nothing except her handbag and an exhausted mind. She told herself to forget what she'd seen. Forget the microfilm. Forget the impossible secret. Forget the diamond. Halfway across the old cathedral square, every pigeon suddenly exploded into the air. She stopped walking. Black SUVs rolled silently onto the cobblestones. One, then another, then 4 more. None displayed license plates. Pedestrians instinctively stepped aside. Nobody spoke. The convoy stopped without a sound. The rear door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, perfectly tailored black overcoat, black leather gloves, no umbrella. Rain gathered on his dark hair without him seeming to notice. People lowered their eyes before he even looked at them. Claire had never seen him before, but somehow she knew exactly who he was. Not because of his face, because of the silence. The kind of silence that only surrounded someone the world feared. He didn't look at anyone else, only her. Their eyes met across the rain. His expression remained unreadable, cold, controlled, almost emotionless. Yet something flickered beneath the surface. Recognition. Impossible. Claire had never met this man. He began walking toward her, one slow step after another. No bodyguard followed. None needed to. Every person nearby instinctively moved away. Claire's heartbeat pounded against her ribs. He stopped barely 6 feet from her. "You opened it." His voice was calm, not accusing, not angry, simply certain. Claire swallowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do. I inspected a diamond. You opened it." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "I'm not discussing private clients." For the first time, something almost resembling approval crossed his face. Almost. "My name," he said quietly. "Doesn't matter. I didn't ask." "No." A faint pause. "You were supposed to." Another strange silence settled between them. Rain fell harder. Claire finally spoke. "If you're the owner." "I'm not." His answer came instantly. "I'm the reason you're still alive." The first gunshot shattered the cathedral windows. Glass exploded overhead. Someone screamed. Claire instinctively ducked. Before she could move again, the stranger grabbed her arm. Hard. Another shot echoed. A black sedan accelerated across the square. Masked gunmen leaned from the windows. Automatic rifles. People scattered in every direction. The stranger pulled Claire behind a stone fountain, just as bullets ripped through the pavement where she'd been standing. Stone shattered beside her face. She looked at him in disbelief. He hadn't flinched. He calmly watched the attackers, calculating, waiting. His coat fluttered in the wind. Then, he reached beneath it. Claire expected a pistol. Instead, he drew a compact rifle. Elegant, custom-made, terrifying. 3 shots. 3 flashes. The speeding sedan crashed into a marble monument. Silence. The attack had lasted less than 12 seconds. Police sirens echoed somewhere far away. The stranger lowered the weapon. He never celebrated, never looked relieved. He simply turned back toward Claire. "They found you faster than I expected." "What do you mean?" "They found me. They know you saw the microfilm." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. "I didn't tell anyone. You didn't have to." His eyes lifted toward the rooftops. "Someone inside your workshop already did." Minutes later, another convoy of black vehicles surrounded the square. Not police. Different men, better armed. The stranger's expression hardened for the first time. "They're early." Claire followed his gaze. More black SUVs. More rifles. More men in tailored suits. Only these men weren't his. One stepped forward holding a silver briefcase. He smiled. "Hand us the cutter." The stranger didn't answer. "She's not yours." The man laughed. "Neither is Europe anymore." Claire looked between them. She still didn't know the stranger's name, but every armed man aimed their weapons at him, not at her, as though he alone was the greatest threat in the square. The silver-haired man opened the briefcase. Inside lay dozens of photographs. Claire's breath caught. Every picture was of her, walking to work, buying coffee, reading alone, leaving restaurants, standing outside her apartment. Hundreds, taken over years. The stranger glanced at the photographs. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You've been watching her," the silver-haired man said, "for much longer than we realized." Claire slowly turned toward the mysterious man. "You know me?" He didn't answer. The silver-haired man smiled wider. "Oh, you haven't told her yet." "Told me what?" No one spoke. Rain continued falling. Finally, the stranger looked directly into Claire's frightened eyes. His voice was quieter than before. "They're not hunting the diamond anymore." A long pause. "They're hunting you." Claire's mind refused to process what she had just heard. "They're hunting Me? Her voice barely rose above the rain. The silver-haired man chuckled as if she had asked an innocent question. You still doesn't understand, does she? His gaze shifted toward the man, standing protectively between them. You should have told her. Years ago. The Mafia boss remained perfectly still. His expression never changed. Only his eyes hardened. You've already said too much. The silver-haired man smiled. I've barely started. He snapped his fingers. Dozens of armed men emerged from the surrounding streets. They weren't rushing. They moved with frightening discipline, quietly sealing every exit from the cathedral square. Tourists were already gone. Police sirens had stopped approaching. Someone had ordered them away. Claire realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't a public shootout anymore. This was an execution. The stranger took one slow step backward until he stood directly in front of Claire. Without looking at her, he spoke. When I tell you to run, I'm not leaving you. You misunderstand. His voice remained calm. I'm not asking. Claire stared at the broad silhouette, shielding her from more than 30 rifles. She still didn't know his name. She knew nothing about him. Yet every bullet in the square seemed aimed at his back instead of hers. The silver-haired man sighed dramatically. You've become sentimental. No. The Mafia boss answered without emotion. I've become efficient. Another pause. If you want her. His hand slowly tightened around the rifle. Come through me. Everything exploded at once. Gunfire ripped across the square. Stone pillars shattered. Car windows burst into glittering fragments. The Mafia boss grabbed Claire by the wrist and pulled her behind a marble staircase. Stay down. Bullets tore through the stone above them. Claire covered her head. She had never experienced violence like this. Not in Antwerp. Not anywhere. Her breathing became uneven. Then, she noticed something impossible. He wasn't hiding. He was counting. Every burst of gunfire. Every reload. Every sniper position reflected in the rain-soaked windows. His mind worked like a battlefield computer. 3 seconds later, he moved. Fast. Almost impossibly fast. He fired twice while crossing open ground. 2 attackers collapsed. Without breaking stride, he kicked open the driver's door of a nearby SUV and shoved Claire inside. Don't get out. What about you? I'll be back. Before she could protest, the door slammed shut. Inside the armored vehicle, Claire's hands shook uncontrollably. The windows were bulletproof. Outside, chaos unfolded beneath sheets of rain. She watched the mysterious Mafia boss move through the battlefield with terrifying precision. He never wasted a bullet, never raised his voice, never hesitated. His men had finally arrived. Black SUVs surrounded the square. More armed guards poured into the streets. Yet none of them dared stand beside him, unless ordered. They treated him with something deeper than respect. Fear. Absolute fear. One bodyguard opened the rear door. Miss Laurent. She instinctively pulled away. I don't know you. I know. We need to leave. I'm not going anywhere. The guard lowered his head slightly. With respect, you no longer have that choice. 5 minutes later, the convoy disappeared into Antwerp's rain-covered streets. Claire sat in silence inside the back seat. Across from her sat the Mafia boss. Neither spoke. The luxurious cabin was almost unnaturally quiet. No music, no phone calls. Only the soft rhythm of rain, striking reinforced glass. Claire finally broke the silence. Who are you? He looked out the window. A dangerous man. I figured that out already. I'm also the reason you're still breathing. I don't even know your name. You don't need it. I think I do. For several long seconds. Nothing. Then, Luca. Only one word. Luca Moretti. The name hit the driver like electricity. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. Claire noticed. Whoever Luca Moretti truly was. Even his own people reacted to hearing his name aloud. The convoy entered an underground garage, hidden beneath an abandoned textile factory. Heavy steel doors closed behind them. Within seconds, mechanics began changing license plates. Another team replaced damaged vehicles. Everyone moved with military precision. Claire looked around. This isn't a factory. No. Luca stepped from the SUV. It's a transit house. For criminals. For survivors. He started walking. Claire stayed where she was. I'm not following you. He stopped. Without turning around, he asked, do you know how many people tried to kill you today? No. 40. Claire's stomach tightened. Do you know how many more are coming? Silence. Neither do I. He finally looked back. If you stay here, you live. If you leave, he glanced toward the sealed entrance. They'll find your body before sunrise. Hours later, Claire stood inside a candlelit suite that looked more like a royal residence than a safe house. A fireplace burned quietly. Fresh clothes waited on the bed. Someone had already stocked the kitchen with her favorite coffee. She frowned. How could they know that? She opened the refrigerator. The exact yogurt brand she bought every Tuesday. Her preferred mineral water. Even the strawberry jam she always picked despite pretending she didn't like sweets. A chill ran through her. This wasn't preparation. This was knowledge. Someone had studied her life in microscopic detail. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Luca entered carrying a wooden box. He placed it on the table. Inside rested the blue diamond. Perfect. Untouched. Claire looked at him in disbelief. You brought it? I couldn't leave it behind. Then give it to them. No. You said they're after me. They are. So this ends if they get the diamond. Luca slowly closed the lid. No. It gets worse. He looked directly into her eyes. The diamond stopped mattering the moment you opened it. Claire folded her arms. Then, tell me the truth. I can't. You won't. There are things you cannot unknow. She stepped closer. I'm already involved. You have no idea how involved. Before either could speak again, one of Luca's security chiefs entered hurriedly. They found Victor. Claire looked up immediately. My supervisor? The guard nodded grimly. He was murdered less than an hour ago. Her face went pale. No. They made it look like a robbery. Claire sank into a nearby chair. Victor, dead. Because of the diamond? Or because of her? Luca watched her quietly. He didn't offer empty comfort. Didn't touch her. Didn't tell her everything would be fine. Instead, he gave an order. Double the perimeter. The guard hesitated. They're already asking questions. I didn't ask what they were asking. I asked for twice the security. Yes, boss. The man disappeared instantly. Claire stared into the fire. You knew. Luca remained silent. You knew someone inside the workshop betrayed me. Yes. You knew Victor would die. I knew he was in danger. You could have saved him. For the first time, a flicker of regret crossed Luca's face, barely visible. I was too late. The answer wasn't defensive. It sounded like something he had already blamed himself for. Claire looked away. She wanted to hate him. Everything about him represented violence, secrets, power, death. And yet, he had crossed a battlefield to shield her with his own body. He had never once asked for gratitude, never once tried to frighten her into obedience. It confused her more than his silence ever could. Near midnight, Claire couldn't sleep. She stepped onto the stone balcony, overlooking the dark forest surrounding the estate. Cold wind brushed her face. Then she noticed movement below. Luca, standing alone in the rain. No umbrella, no guards beside him, just him, watching every tree line surrounding the property, as if he expected death to emerge from the darkness at any second. She studied him from above. For someone feared across Europe, he looked strangely lonely, almost exhausted. At that exact moment, Luca slowly lifted his eyes. Their gazes met across the rain. Neither spoke. Neither smiled. Neither looked away. Then a sharp electronic alarm shattered the silence. Red emergency lights flooded the estate. A guard's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Boss." Thermal drones approaching from the eastern ridge. Another voice cut in. Multiple unidentified helicopters crossing Belgian airspace. The chief of security's next words froze everyone inside the mansion. "They're not sending assassins anymore. The 5 families are coming themselves." The alarm echoed through every corridor of the estate, replacing the quiet rhythm of the rain with controlled panic. Guards moved in perfect formation, rifles ready, while armored shutters descended over every window. Claire stood frozen on the balcony until Luca appeared beside her. "You need to come inside." She looked toward the dark horizon, where distant helicopter lights flickered through the storm. "Who are they?" "They're not here to negotiate." His tone remained calm, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "They're here because 5 powerful families have finally agreed on something. And what is that? That you're worth starting a war over." He gently guided her away from the balcony, without touching more than her wrist. Even in the middle of chaos, he seemed careful not to force anything upon her. Inside the command room, enormous digital maps covered one wall. Red markers blinked across Belgium, France, Germany, and northern Italy. Claire frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Our safe routes. There are dozens." There were. Luca walked to the center screen. One by one, red markers disappeared. "Those have already been compromised." Another vanished, and that one, within seconds, more than half of the escape network was gone. Claire stared at the screen. "They know everywhere you hide?" "They know everywhere I've hidden before." His security chief approached. "Boss, we've confirmed movement near Luxembourg, Strasbourg, and the Swiss border." Luca nodded once. "They're predicting where we'll run. They've anticipated." Claire folded her arms. "So we don't take a conventional route." Every eye in the room shifted toward her. For the first time, Luca looked almost amused. "You think like a survivor. I think like someone who doesn't want to die." "Good." His gaze lingered on her for a second longer than before. "Keep thinking that way." Within 30 minutes, the estate had become a ghost. Luxury furniture remained untouched. Expensive artwork still hung on the walls. Wine bottles worth fortunes stayed locked in their cellar. Everyone simply walked away. Claire looked back once before climbing aboard an unmarked midnight train hidden beneath the abandoned factory. This place cost millions. Luca never looked back. "It can be replaced. You aren't even trying to defend it." "I don't defend buildings." "What do you defend?" His answer came after several silent seconds. "The people who matter." The train slipped into darkness beneath Europe, traveling through forgotten tunnels that had existed since the Second World War. Claire had expected soldiers. Instead, she found books. An entire private library occupied one carriage. Another contained a dining room. The sleeping cabin looked more luxurious than 5-star hotels she'd visited. "You live like this?" "I travel like this." "You expected something worse?" "I expected." She searched for the words. "A prison. It becomes one only if you stop making choices." She laughed softly. "You gave me one choice. Trust me or die." "Exactly. That's hardly a choice." "No." He finally looked directly at her. It wasn't. The honesty unsettled her, more than a lie would have. Hours passed. Neither spoke much. Rain slowly disappeared as the train crossed into eastern France. Claire wandered through the quiet carriage, unable to sleep. She found an old chessboard already set. One white piece stood alone. The Black King had been removed. Luca entered moments later. "You play?" "My father taught me." The words slipped out before she realized it. She hadn't spoken about him in years. Luca remained standing. "What was he like?" Claire smiled sadly. "I don't really know." She touched the white queen. "He died when I was 6. So I've been told." She looked up immediately. What does that mean? He sat across from her. It means some stories are written for children, and some for adults. You know something. I know many things. About my father? Silence. The train rolled through another tunnel. Finally, Luca moved a pawn. He wasn't a jeweler. Claire's breathing slowed. My mother always said he worked overseas. He did. What was he? He transported information. For who? Luca looked at the board instead of her. For everyone. Claire frowned. A courier? A man trusted by enemies. That doesn't make sense. It never does until you understand the rules. And what are the rules? If every family trusted one messenger, no one killed the messenger. The realization slowly reached her. Her father hadn't carried jewels. He had carried secrets. Then why was he killed? Luca didn't answer. Instead, he reached inside his coat and placed an old silver pocket watch on the table. Claire froze. My mother. Her voice cracked. She kept one, exactly like this. It belonged to him. She carefully picked it up. The initials inside matched photographs she'd seen as a child. Ah. Le. Alex Laurent. Her father's name. How did you get this? Luca answered quietly. He gave it to me. She looked at him in disbelief. You knew him. I owed him my life. Everything inside Claire stopped. The room suddenly felt too small. You said you've never met me. I hadn't. But you knew my father. Yes. And you never told me. It wasn't my story to tell. Claire stood abruptly. You've been watching me. Yes. You knew where I lived. Yes. You knew where I worked. Yes. You knew what coffee I drank. Another pause. Yes. She stared at him, anger and confusion fighting inside her. So what am I? His answer came, without hesitation. A promise. She blinked. What? The last promise I ever made to your father. The words lingered between them. Claire wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, What promise? Before Luca could answer, the emergency radio burst to life. Boss. His security chief sounded breathless. We've intercepted encrypted transmissions. Luca took the receiver. Report. They've issued a continental bounty. Claire watched his expression change for the first time. Not fear. Calculation. They're offering how much? The guard hesitated. Everything. What does that mean? The 5 families have emptied every shared account. Claire looked between them. Luca slowly lowered the radio. Every assassin in Europe is now hunting the same target. She swallowed. Me? No. His eyes locked onto hers. Us. The train suddenly lurched violently. Lights flickered. Coffee cups crashed onto the floor. The brakes screamed against steel. A massive explosion erupted somewhere ahead. The entire carriage tilted sideways. Guards reached for their weapons. One of them shouted from the next compartment, The tracks. They've blown the tracks. Before the train came to a complete stop, another explosion tore through the darkness, much closer this time. Then came the unmistakable sound of helicopter blades, hovering directly overhead. The train shuddered violently as steel screamed against steel. Sparks burst past the windows, illuminating the tunnel in flashes of orange and white. Claire instinctively grabbed the edge of the table, but the force threw her sideways. Before she could hit the floor, a strong arm caught her. Luca steadied her with one hand around her waist, releasing her the instant the train stopped moving. Can you stand? She nodded, still trying to catch her breath. What just happened? They collapsed the exit tunnel. The emergency lights switched to deep crimson. A metallic voice echoed through every carriage. Primary route compromised. Evacuation required immediately. The chief of security rushed inside, his suit stained with dust. Boss, they knew exactly where we'd surface. They've been tracking us. Not anymore. Luca looked toward Claire. They're predicting us. The chief unfolded a satellite image across the table. 3 helicopters hovered above the forest outside. Armored vehicles, blocked both highway exits. Thermal drones circled overhead. Claire stared at the map. They brought an army. No. Luca calmly loaded fresh magazines into his pistol. They brought 5. She looked at him. What? 5 armies. He folded the map. They're working together. And that's never happened before. The security chief answered quietly. Not in 50 years. Silence settled over the carriage. Claire suddenly understood the scale of what she had become part of. This wasn't one crime family hunting them. It was an entire underworld, rewriting its own rules. Luca turned to his men. Burn the train. Several guards looked surprised. But boss, I said burn it. It's worth. I know what it's worth. His voice never rose. Yet nobody questioned him again. Within seconds, cans of accelerant were being emptied through the luxurious carriages. Claire watched in disbelief. The library, the paintings, the antique. You don't care? They slowed us down. You spent millions on this. I spent years building it. And you're setting it on fire? Luca looked at her with quiet certainty. I can build another train. I can't build another you. The words escaped before he seemed to realize he had spoken them. For the first time since meeting him, silence unsettled him. Claire stared into his eyes. He looked away first. Move. No explanation. No apology. Only the order. Minutes later, flames swallowed the train. The fire spread through polished mahogany, rare books, handcrafted furniture, and priceless artwork until the entire convoy became an inferno beneath the mountain. Explosions echoed through the tunnel one after another. When the rival helicopters reached the wreckage, nothing remained but burning steel. From a ridge nearly 2 miles away, Claire watched the fire consume everything. You wanted them to believe we died. I wanted them to stop looking here. They won't stop. No, they'll simply start guessing again. He opened the rear door of an unmarked Land Rover, hidden beneath camouflage netting. That's when we become unpredictable. The convoy had shrunk from 20 vehicles to 3. No armored limousines. No luxury. Just mud-covered off-road trucks disappearing into the dense forests along the French border. For the first time in years, Luca Moretti was traveling without the symbols of power everyone associated with his name. Claire noticed something else. He hadn't contacted anyone. No politicians. No corrupt officials. No police. No favors. He was relying only on the handful of people sitting inside those 3 vehicles. You trust them. I trust very few people. But them? I've buried enough men to know who stays. Hours later, just before dawn, they arrived at an abandoned monastery perched high above a valley wrapped in morning fog. The stone walls were weathered. The stained glass windows had long since shattered. Yet inside, hidden beneath centuries-old architecture, modern security systems silently came to life. Steel doors sealed behind them. Motion sensors activated. Hidden cameras rotated. Claire looked around. This used to be a church. It still is. She frowned. There are armed guards in the chapel. There have been for 12 years. He led her into what had once been the monastery library. Only one room remained untouched. Ancient wooden shelves. Thousands of old books. A fireplace burning quietly. Everything else had been transformed into a fortress. Claire walked toward one of the shelves. Her fingers stopped on a leather-bound Bible. Something inside felt thicker than normal. She opened it. A folded photograph slipped onto the floor. She bent to pick it up, then froze. The picture showed a much younger Luca. He looked no older than 25. Standing beside him was her father, Alex Laurent. Both men were smiling. Claire's heartbeat pounded. Her father had one hand on Luca's shoulder. Like family. She slowly turned around. Why is this here? Luca didn't answer immediately. He crossed the room, picked up the photograph, and stared at it for several long seconds. He hated photographs. My father? He believed memories should stay in people. Then why keep this? Because it's the only one we ever took. Claire searched his face. You weren't just acquaintances. No, you were friends. Another silence. We were brothers. The words hit her harder than any gunshot. My father never mentioned you. He couldn't. Why? Because if anyone knew we were connected, he would have signed your death warrant before you were born. Claire sat down slowly. Nothing she believed about her family made sense anymore. My mother told me he died in a robbery. Luca's expression darkened. She told you the version that let you sleep. So tell me the truth. He walked toward the fireplace. For a long moment, only the crackling flames filled the room. Then he spoke. 26 years ago, your father was the only man every mafia family trusted. He carried agreements that ended wars. He prevented massacres. He made enemies shake hands. Claire listened without interrupting. One night, he accepted one final delivery. The microfilm. Luca nodded. It wasn't hidden inside a diamond then. It was hidden on him. What happened? He discovered the names, the accounts, the politicians, the judges, the people controlling every family from the shadows. Claire whispered. So they killed him. They tried. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? Tried? Luca turned toward her. They never found him. Claire felt her pulse stop. My father never died. Before Luca could continue, the reinforced doors burst open. The chief of security entered, breathing hard. Boss, we've got a problem. What is it? The 5 families just released surveillance files. Claire frowned. What surveillance files? The guard placed a tablet on the table. Its screen was filled with photographs, hundreds of them, not the ones she'd seen before. These were newer, taken over the past 3 days. Every picture showed Luca, watching her, standing across the street from her apartment, sitting alone inside a cafe while she worked, following at a distance through Antwerp, waiting outside the diamond workshop before sunrise. Claire slowly looked at him. You've been there. All this time. Luca said nothing. The chief swallowed. They didn't release them to threaten us. They released them to the world. Every news outlet in Europe is already reporting the same headline. Claire's voice was barely audible. What headline? The guard hesitated, then answered. The most feared mafia boss has been secretly obsessed with one woman for years. Claire's hand trembled as she lowered the tablet. Every photograph, every date, every location. None of them had been fabricated. Luca had truly been there. Not once, not twice, for years. He never interrupted her life, never approached her, never let himself be seen. He had simply existed in the background like an invisible shadow, watching, waiting, protecting. She slowly lifted her eyes. You've been lying to me since the moment we met. Luca stood motionless. I've been keeping a promise. A promise doesn't require stalking someone. No. His voice remained quiet. It requires making sure they live long enough to hate you for it. Claire wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. Instead, she remembered something she had never understood. The strange man who had pulled her away from a speeding truck 3 winters ago before disappearing into the crowd. The black SUV that always seemed to appear whenever she worked late. The anonymous donations that had saved the diamond workshop after a devastating fire 5 years earlier. The feeling that someone had always arrived moments before disaster. She looked at him again. It was you. Luca didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everything suddenly made sense. Before another word could be spoken, the monastery shook. A deep explosion rolled beneath the ancient stone floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The security chief's voice thundered through the hallway. Boss! South wall breach. Every guard reached for their weapons. Luca was already moving. He grabbed a rifle from the nearest table and handed Claire a compact pistol. She stared at it. I don't know how to use this. I know. Then, why give it to me? So you remember you still have a choice. He took one step closer. If anyone except me reaches you. His eyes locked onto hers. Don't hesitate. He turned before she could answer. Within seconds, the peaceful monastery transformed into a battlefield. Gunfire erupted outside. Stone shattered. The stained glass windows exploded inward in showers of colored fragments. One guard crashed through the doorway, bleeding heavily from the shoulder. They're inside. Smoke poured through the western corridor. Luca didn't retreat. He advanced. His men instinctively formed around him, but he cut through the formation, placing himself at the very front. Claire watched in disbelief. Every bullet seemed drawn toward him. He moved with frightening precision, firing only when necessary. No wasted motion, no panic, only absolute control. A masked attacker burst through a side entrance. Before Claire could even react, Luca intercepted him. The fight lasted less than 5 seconds. One brutal strike, a disarmed weapon. Silence. He never looked back to admire what he'd done. His attention remained fixed on the next threat. Another explosion rocked the monastery. The lights flickered. Emergency generators activated. The chief hurried toward Luca. They've surrounded every exit. How many? At least 80. Luca glanced toward the old monastery map, hanging on the wall. There are never 80. The chief frowned. What? There are too many. Claire stepped closer. What do you mean? They're distracting us. He pointed toward the ancient library. The real target isn't this building. He looked directly at Claire. It's the diamond. Claire's pulse quickened. She had almost forgotten. The wooden box still rested inside the library, hidden beneath layers of reinforced steel. Luca immediately understood. They already know where it is. Without another word, he sprinted toward the library. Claire followed despite every guard telling her to stay behind. By the time they reached the vault, thick smoke had filled the corridor. The reinforced door remained locked. But something else caught Luca's attention. A tiny blinking red light beneath the handle. He grabbed Claire's arm. Back. What is it? Explosive. He barely finished speaking before the vault door erupted outward. The blast hurled both of them across the hallway. Claire hit the floor hard. Her ears rang. Everything blurred. When her vision cleared, she saw Luca already trying to stand despite blood running down one side of his forehead. He wasn't looking at his wound. He was looking at the open vault. The wooden box was gone. A single masked figure disappeared through the collapsing smoke. Luca's expression changed for the first time since she'd met him. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. No. He sprinted after the thief. Claire pushed herself to her feet and followed. The chase wound through narrow stone corridors before spilling into the monastery courtyard where rain had begun falling once again. The masked man leaped onto a waiting motorcycle. The wooden box was strapped securely behind him. Luca raised his rifle. Claire expected him to fire. He didn't. Instead, he lowered the weapon. The motorcycle disappeared into the forest. Claire stared at him. You let him go. If I fired, I'd hit the diamond. So? He looked at her. The microfilm survives only if the diamond survives. Another convoy of black vehicles roared into the monastery courtyard. The security chief jumped from the lead SUV. Boss, we've tracked the signal. What signal? The box. Claire frowned. You put a tracker inside? Luca shook his head. I put one inside the microfilm. The chief spread a digital map across the hood of the vehicle. A blinking signal raced eastward, toward northern Italy. Luca studied it for only a second. They're heading for Verona. The chief nodded. To the summit. Claire looked between them. What summit? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Luca spoke. Every 10 years, the 5 families gather in one place. And this year, they're bringing every surviving boss. Claire's stomach tightened. They're going to open the diamond. No. Luca's voice became colder than she'd ever heard. They're going to auction what's inside. She blinked. Auction? The names, the accounts, the secrets, the future of organized crime. The realization hit her. Whoever controlled that microfilm wouldn't simply become rich. They would control every family in Europe, every politician tied to them, every judge, every shipment, every betrayal, everything. The chief looked toward Luca. We still have time. Luca slowly shook his head. No, we have one chance. He turned toward Claire. If we fail, Europe won't belong to the 5 families anymore. It will belong to whoever buys the truth. Claire searched his face. What are you going to do? He looked toward the rain-soaked mountains beyond the monastery. His answer came with terrifying certainty. I'm going to destroy the diamond. Claire froze. The most valuable diamond in the world? Yes, but that's the only proof. It's also the only reason they'll never stop hunting you. She whispered. You'd destroy something worth $500 million. For me? For the first time, Luca didn't hide behind silence, didn't avoid the truth. He met her eyes. I'd destroy everything I own, if it meant giving you a life they could never steal. At that exact moment, a secure satellite phone rang inside his coat. Only 3 people in the world possessed that number. Luca answered. He didn't speak. He only listened. Then, for the first time, the color drained from his face. Slowly, he lowered the phone. Claire's heart began pounding. What happened? His voice was barely above a whisper. They found him. She frowned. Found who? Luca looked directly into her eyes. Your father, and he's still alive. Claire felt the world fall silent. Rain continued to fall across the shattered monastery courtyard, but she heard nothing except the final 4 words echoing inside her mind. Your father is still alive. She stared at Luca, searching for even the slightest sign that he was lying. There has to be a mistake. I've spent 20 years hoping there was. His voice remained steady, but she noticed something she had never seen before. His hands. The man who had stood motionless under sniper fire. The man who had walked through explosions without blinking. His hands were trembling. The satellite phone rang again. Luca answered immediately. Location. A pauser. Confirmed. Visually, another pause. His eyes slowly closed. I'll be there. He ended the call and looked toward the security team. Prepare the aircraft. The chief hesitated. It's a trap. I know. They're expecting you. I know. They'll have every family waiting. I know. No one argued again. Everyone understood that once Luca Moretti made a decision, it became reality. Claire stepped in front of him. I'm coming. No. This is about my father. It's also about keeping you alive. I'm done hiding behind you. You were never behind me. His eyes softened for only a heartbeat. You've always been the reason I kept moving forward. Claire took another step closer. If my father is alive, he deserves to see me. And if he isn't, the question landed like a knife. She had no answer. Luca gently placed the blue diamond into a reinforced steel case. It no longer looked like a priceless jewel. It looked like a bomb waiting to explode. Because, in a way, it was. Inside that flawless crystal rested enough secrets to destroy governments, topple criminal empires, and rewrite the balance of power across Europe. The helicopter lifted into the storm just before sunset. Below them, the Alps disappeared beneath dark clouds. No one spoke during the flight. Claire sat across from Luca, watching him study satellite images of an ancient fortress overlooking Lake Garda, the annual summit of the 5 families. For decades, every major decision affecting the European underworld had been made behind those walls. Tonight, they would auction the microfilm hidden inside the diamond. And tonight, Luca intended to end it forever. As the helicopter descended behind a wooded ridge, they continued on foot through abandoned vineyards toward the fortress. Music drifted through the night. Classical strings, crystal glasses, elegant laughter. It looked less like a gathering of criminals and more like a royal gala. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Private security patrolled every path. Inside the grand ballroom, more than 50 of the most powerful figures in organized crime sat beneath glittering chandeliers. On a velvet pedestal at the center of the room rested the diamond. Claire stopped walking. They already have it. Luca nodded. Exactly where I wanted it. She frowned. You let them take it. I needed every family in one room. The realization slowly dawned on her. He had never planned to recover the diamond. He had planned to destroy it. The auction began. One elderly don stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we sell not a diamond, but the future. Applause echoed through the hall. The steel case was opened. The blue diamond shimmered beneath the lights. Every eye fixed upon it. Hidden among the catering staff and musicians, Luca's people quietly moved into position. Claire's heartbeat thundered. Everything had led to this moment. The don smiled. The opening bid. The ballroom doors exploded inward. Every conversation stopped. Luca walked inside alone. No bodyguards. No mask. No fear. His black suit was still stained with dried blood from the monastery. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the marble floor. The room fell silent. Nobody reached for a weapon. Not yet, because everyone wanted to hear what the most feared man in Europe had come to say. Luca's voice carried effortlessly across the ballroom. That diamond isn't for sale. The don laughed. It stopped belonging to you yesterday. It never belonged to me. It belongs to history. Another don stood. You came alone? Luca looked around the room. I came to give every one of you the same opportunity. What opportunity? Walk away. Laughter spread through the ballroom, one after another, until the first shot rang out. A sniper hidden on a nearby rooftop fired through the glass ceiling. Chaos erupted. Tables overturned. Crystal shattered. Guests ran in every direction. The 5 families immediately turned on one another, each convinced another family had betrayed the agreement. Within seconds, the ballroom became a battlefield. Gunfire echoed beneath the chandeliers. Claire crouched behind a marble column as bullets ripped through the walls. She looked toward the stage. The diamond still rested on its pedestal. Luca walked toward it without hesitation. 3 armed men blocked his path. He disarmed the first, dropped the second. The third lowered his weapon before Luca even reached him. Fear was stronger than loyalty. Claire saw another assassin emerge from behind the stage, aiming directly at Luca's back. Without thinking, she ran. Luca! The gun fired. She slammed into him. The bullet struck her shoulder instead. Pain exploded through her body. She collapsed into his arms. For the first time since she'd known him, Luca lost control. Claire. His voice echoed across the ballroom. Every person turned. The feared Mafia Boss dropped to his knees, holding her against his chest as blood spread across her white blouse. His hands shook. His breathing broke. Stay with me. Claire forced herself to smile, despite the pain. You said I'd have a choice. You do. Then let me help finish this. She slowly opened her hand. Inside was the heavy steel hammer she had grabbed from a display used during the auction ceremony. Luca looked from the hammer to the diamond, then back to Claire. She nodded once. No words were needed. He understood. Luca rose to his feet. The ballroom gradually fell silent again. Every surviving don watched him approach the pedestal. One shouted, "If you destroy it, you destroy everything." Luca answered, without looking back. Exactly. He lifted the hammer high above his head. For one endless second, no one breathed. Then, the hammer crashed down. The world's most expensive diamond exploded into thousands of glittering fragments that scattered across the marble floor like frozen stars. The microfilm inside shattered with it. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Years of secrets. Gone. Fortunes. Gone. Blackmail. Gone. Control. Gone. Luca slowly lowered the hammer. I'd rather burn my empire than let another generation hunt the woman I love. No one moved. There was nothing left worth killing for. Sirens began echoing in the distance. Not corrupt officers this time. International task forces. Governments had traced the summit. Without the microfilm, the 5 families turned on one another in desperation. The empire they had built over decades collapsed in a single night. Weeks later, the newspapers called it the night the European mafia fell. The fortress stood abandoned, its vaults empty, its alliances destroyed forever. Claire recovered slowly, in a quiet lakeside town in northern Italy. There were no bodyguards outside her home anymore. No black SUVs, no shadows following her through the streets. One crisp autumn morning, she opened a small jewelry studio overlooking the water. The first customer arrived just after sunrise. He placed an old silver pocket watch on the counter. I think this belongs here. Claire smiled before looking up. Luca. No suite. No security. No weapons. Just the man. What happens now? She asked softly. He looked out across the lake before answering. Now, you get to choose me without fear. Claire walked around the counter and took his hand. This time, neither of them let go. If this story kept you listening until the very end, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more cinematic Mafia Boss romances every week. And tell me in the comments, if you were Claire, would you have chosen the diamond or the man who destroyed it to save your future?